Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to be talking about sort of a nascent center that we have been starting up at George Mason University called the Virginia Climate Center. I'm actually struck at what I would consider small and medium-sized cities versus in the American context versus the Indian context in terms of the sheer size. Just very eye-opening. So for those of us who are not as familiar with the U.S., Virginia, I've marked in a little red outline there, a red fill. It's situated on the east coast of the United States, and it's in the area we call the Mid-Atlantic, sort of in between the northern and the southern part of the United States, which has sort of a political and social demographic sort of implications that in turn impact a lot of our work. Um, a little bit about the state of Virginia or the Commonwealth of Virginia. The total population of the state is about 8.6 million. For context, New York City by itself has about that same population. So it really is a land of medium and small sized cities. The biggest or the most populated city we have in the state is Virginia Beach, which is in the sort of the southeast corner of the state. However, most of the people in the state live in the northern part of Virginia, which is right next to Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. And that has a very important implications in terms of social demographics. In fact, there's a very strong sort of income and political and all sorts of steep gradients going from north to south. About four of the wealthiest counties by household income in the United States are in that Northern Virginia region. And if you go all the way to the southern part, the income disparities are very large. I put the numbers in there. So it's quite a difference in household incomes. And that presents a lot of challenges if you want to start engaging with communities on the topic of climate change in those locations. First of all, there are technical capacity issues in small and medium sized cities compared to some of the bigger ones. Some places may have one planner versus a very wealthy county may have a team of planners or maybe various teams dedicated to different hazards or different aspects of infrastructure. There are political ideology challenges. In the US, climate change is somewhat of a controversial topic in some locations. And if you're going to engage with a community and you're telling them you're a climate change scientist, then that might just close doors to you rather than open them. And there's a big disparities in economic resources. Less wealthy counties have fewer people willing to or that have the time to write grants to the federal government, so they get less of a share of the federal money pie, in spite of the fact there's literally money raining down right now from some of the recent legislation in recent years. So it's kind of a complicated area, even though it has a small population. To sort of address some of these challenges, we've created the Virginia Climate Center. It's a congressionally directed community project, which in the US used to be called an earmark, meaning that our legislator put it in a law and then we got the money to start it up rather than the typical sort of proposal system that we have for grants. And our initial focus is in that Northern Virginia region, just basically for convenience reasons. Our university is located there. So we have existing relationships there. Our university is a presence in the area. We were able to sort of round up a set of partners across sort of various different sizes or scales. From the regional, working with the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, which is a planning commission out of about a dozen or so in the state, all the way down to municipal. The city of Fairfax and Fairfax County, for example, which are all the way up in the north part of Virginia. But we also work with non-governmental organizations like the Virginia Clinicians for Climate Action. So we kind of work with a sort of broad range of actors or stakeholders that each have sort of their own sort of spatial scales. We also have expertise across a large amount of disciplines. I'm part of the College of Science, and I sit in the Center for Ocean Land Atmosphere Interactions. So we bring all the atmospheric climate science to the table, but we also have strong support from climate change communication, urban policy, and even the business school is heavily involved in our endeavors. So we are able to sort of connect communities to various sets of expertise that they might need. And I want to talk a little bit about the approach that we follow. We try to meet communities where they are. And that means very different things to different communities. But very broadly speaking, we do three sort of big things. The first one is provide technical assistance to communities. And that means giving them the latest climate projections and trends, giving them access to station data. Again, many of these communities don't have people who can go and open a NetCDF file from the GCM output. So just sort of making that accessible to them. We also evaluate climate solutions when we engage very deeply with certain cities, and I'll show some examples, some of the projects that we're undertaking in a few slides. We also see ourselves as sort of facilitating network of communities, stakeholders and researchers. So making sure people know who to ask if they need some particular expertise, connecting technical capacities, both in our university or beyond our university with different communities. And we also support planning and implementation. We help some communities write grants. For example, we helped the city of Fairfax write a grant for the recently released urban forestry, urban and community forestry grant from the U.S. Forest Service. But we also help them with cost-benefit analysis and stuff like that in other locations. The other sort of side of how we approach working with communities is sort of taking up a sort of tiered approach. Virginia has, I don't know, something like 90 something counties and 30 something cities. We can't go one-on-one with all of them. We just don't have the manpower. And we also have to publish papers and do all the other things faculty have to do. So we try to go and wherever we can do what we call a wholesale approach. Where can we develop products that are useful to a broad audience? Can we develop dashboards that provide climate data to communities directly? Or can we develop a toolkit of case studies that people can or stakeholders can use no matter where in the state they are? For some other regions, we do work on what we call more retail analysis, which is essentially going and working one-on-one with communities and do very specific analyses from flood modeling or dynamical downscaling, you name it, even running surveys and analysis of interventions. So it really does vary depending on what the community needs. We also provide resources to help communities do this. And what that really means is we just give them money. And we found that has been an incredible way of opening doors. People just answer your emails faster if they have some skin in the game. The way we sort of structured it in your initial pilot projects, we just gave them $50,000 to a small group of communities and essentially help them develop projects or develop ways of using that money with us, sort of co-produce. Some examples include they've created a position in one of the cities to essentially work with universities on climate change adaptation and mitigation issues, or even fund part-time positions within their government structures. So with that, we've already started a series of projects that go from the very regional to the very sort of retail version of that work. And I'm just going to go very briefly over some of these efforts. One of the first things we did was with the Virginia Clinicians for Climate Action to quantify the effects of this legislation that passed in Virginia a few years ago that essentially mandates that all power generation in the state has to be non-fossil fuel. It's very ambitious legislation, and we also wanted to look at what would be the healthcare benefits. And we did an analysis using publicly available tools from the EPA, air quality modeling, and sort of benefits modeling to look at some of those healthcare and health costs benefits throughout the whole state of Virginia. At the regional or sort of planning commission scale, we have a project looking at the effect of flooding on road closures. which would in turn inform emergency management in Northern Virginia. What I'm showing there are the hotspots of road closures caused by flooding. So it's a combination of data synthesis and a little bit of flood modeling using HEC-RAS, sort of simplified models to do this kind of work and provide that sort of information to those stakeholders so they can then go and get money from the feds to fix those problems. We also work on extreme heat. It wouldn't be an iCook talk if we didn't talk about urban heat islands. So we also work with communities to look at interventions to extreme heat and why certain groups are using them or not using them by developing a library of case studies. In this case, in the city of Alexandria, I'm showing there the results of the NOAA Urban Heat Island Mapping Campaign for Washington, D.C. that covered part of Alexandria. And essentially, we're going to do that library of case studies, hopefully make that into a statewide product, and also do primary data collection by performing direct outreach directly with communities, disadvantaged communities in Alexandria, and also do surveys, focus groups. And they're very invested in the city of Alexandria. They literally told us, we have all the climate data we need. We really need to focus on interventions now. So that's where we're meeting them and helping them and providing our expertise. And then the final project is sort of a collaboration with capstone students in our data analytics program, where we've engaged with them to sort of create a dashboard of climate data tools, essentially taking the data from NOAA and making it sort of very easily accessible for communities in Virginia. They can look at climatologies, they can look at long-term trends, and they can look at different years for their own county. They can download the data into a CSV file or Excel file and make it very easy to. And this is sort of a work in progress; it's not sort of public yet, but it's progressing pretty nicely along. So probably hoping to make that public in the next few months. So our projects sort of cover this sort of gamut of very, very specialized interventions, all the way down to sort of providing these type of tools that we hope communities are able to use to adapt and mitigate the effects of climate change. A few lessons we've learned along the way is the vastly different technical needs of various communities. Working with a community that has a strong resilience or adaptation team is very different to working with a community that has a single planner and a comprehensive plan from 40 years ago. We have seen the importance of having sort of a point person that will vouch for you, especially in small communities. Some of them won't even return your calls if you don't have that in person. Finding common ground, again, political ideology can get in the way of climate adaptation and trying to find where the common ground where we can actually help or provide assistance to communities in places that they recognize they have a need, instead of trying to litigate sort of very broad issues that sort of make closed doors at the end of the day. And then also sort of the importance of government budget processes at the local level. You want to provide answers to communities in time for them to get money in their budget to do something about it. So there's something about timelines there that we have to really keep in mind so that we're best able to serve these communities. So with that, thank you, and I yield the rest of my time.
So we can have time for